Hello, welcome back to another episode of Just Effin' Ghost Stories. Sorry, it's been a while since I've posted. I'm trying to balance weekly creep and Just Effin' Ghost Stories and work and stuff like that. But I would love to thank the people who have reached out saying that they enjoy this show as much as weekly creep or like stuff along those lines. I even had one person from Australia, I believe. Big shout out there. They actually found Weekly Creep through Just Effing Ghost Stories, which was crazy to me considering, yeah, I get more listens on the actual podcast version, but the videos still have like 20 plays or something. So anyway, with that being said, thank you all very much. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, rate, review, do all those nice things. I'll get that out of the way at the top of the show. And yeah, I think that's enough of that. Let's get on with the ghost stories. This story is sent in by Margan Bryant 994. Hello everyone, my name is Megan. I'm 35 years old and I grew up in Kentucky. Starting when I was about 5, my parents bought a funeral home that was well over 100 years old when they bought it. They owned and ran the funeral home, and it's a pretty large funeral home in my area. We lived in the upstairs area of the funeral home. They still own and operate the funeral home to this day, and I visit pretty regularly and occasionally still have experiences. I had a very interesting childhood growing up, and this is going to be a long read. As a child, I had many experiences every day, all the way up until I moved out at 19. Some were terrifying and some were comforting. We had many resident spirits that just stayed around. Some were human, some definitely weren't human. Each had its own personality and temperament. I still have experiences to this day when I go to visit my parents. The first experience I remember was when I was about 6 years old. I was sitting on the couch in one of the viewing rooms and I got the feeling of being watched. I looked up and saw a woman standing in the corner of the room. She was a young woman in her mid-20s. She was wearing a black dress. She was very pale and she had long red hair. She smiled and waved at me, then said, "Hello, little girl." I said hello back and she smiled again, then disappeared. She would become known as Alice. She was the most extroverted and nice of the resident spirits in the funeral home. She was very talkative. I formed a very good relationship with her. She pretty much became like a second mother to me. She was the matriarch spirit in the funeral home. I would see her almost every day standing in corners or in the middle of a room. She was always smiling and she always said hello. When I would get off the bus from school, she would always be standing there when I would walk in the door to greet me. She would smile and say hello, then would ask how my day was. I would say hello and tell her about my day, then she would disappear. One time in high school, I snuck out to go to a party, and she appeared to my mother in her bedroom and told on me. My mother was in the kitchen waiting up for me when I returned. She protected me from one of the darker, non-human spirits that hung out in the embalming room. The first time I wandered into the embalming room right after we moved in, I saw a spirit that definitely didn't seem human. It looked like a little girl that was wearing a grey t-shirt and black pants. Its skin was like scales. It was very reptilian looking. It had a forked tongue like a snake and red eyes. That first time I saw it, I was just exploring it right after we moved in. I heard a loud growl and looked up, and it was just standing there, staring at me. I was paralyzed with fear. Then Alice appeared. It looked at her and kind of leaned its head to the side like a dog that's curious about something. She told it to leave me alone, and it growled and took a step towards me. Alice then stepped in front of me, and this reptilian thing then looked absolutely terrified. Then Alice stuck her arm out, and this thing started to levitate and was choking. It looked like the Darth Vader choke. Alice then moved her arm to the side, and it flew into the wall and disappeared. After that, Alice turned around, got on her knees in front of me, and told me to be more careful, and then disappeared. I don't know if Alice is human, but I'm not sure. You guys can tell me what you think. She is seemingly very powerful. Now, to give a summary of my experiences with the reptilian spirit. 1. The experience of Alice protecting me. And one time, I saw it in one of the hallways, and it climbed up the wall onto the ceiling and just stared at me, growled, then disappeared. I saw it every time I walked in or passed the embalming room. It would just stand there and stare. It never tried to attack me. I think it was because Alice scared it to death. Now to talk about the spirit that we called the Grey Man. We would see him in the chapel. He was tall and wearing a grey suit and black tie. Most of the time, he just stood there. Sometimes he would wave. He was an older man. He never really bothered anybody. He typically just kept to himself. He was quite protective over the organ in the chapel, so maybe that's what he was attached to. There was a spirit of a little girl that hung out in the living room. She wore a pink dress and had long blonde hair. Most of the time you would hear laughing, then she would appear in front of you, and then run away and disappear. Then there was the spirit we called the General. He was a young man that wore what looked like a military dress uniform from possibly the Civil War. He never really said anything to us, but he was always polite and would tip his hat when we would see him. There was an elderly couple that we would sometimes see standing side by side. They were dressed in Victorian-style clothes, and that's just some of the experiences that my family and I have had. This story is from Autumn Rainfall 1432. I saw a ghost at my sister's pool party. First off, I didn't see it in the pool. It was afterwards. After my sister accidentally kicked my eye in the pool, I decided to pull a prank on her and pretend she gave me a bruised eye. So I grabbed my mother's makeup palette and did the best I could to fake a black eye. And it seemed believable. I walked up to our upstairs loft where my sister and her friends were hanging out, and I showed her my eye, and she obviously freaked out. I made her apologize before she wiped my eye and realized it was makeup. She punched me and we had a laugh. I went downstairs to the bathroom to wash it off. As I was bent over to wash my eye, in my peripheral vision, I saw a small, frail boy. He was wearing a striped shirt and boarding shorts. He had a bowl cut and was glaring at me with distorted facial features. Knowing there was no children as young as he looked at the party, I immediately stood up straight and looked towards him. He was gone. I backed up into the corner of the bathroom and looked around the room, my heart coming out of my ass. I ran out of the room and told my sister as she helped get the rest of the makeup off my eye. After a few months had passed, I had completely forgot about the event. And so had my sister. One evening, I went into my parents' room to collect a shirt that I had left in there from the previous night. My parents' room and the bathroom are connected by a pair of double doors with frosted glass, just like most of the doors in our house. I found my shirt and was on my way out when I noticed 2 small handprints on one of the frosted glass panes. I felt shocked, but then I got shivers on every inch of my body as I remembered what happened after the pool party not too long ago. My heart sank and I ran into the kitchen, grabbing some cleaning supplies and desperately tried wiping it off. But because it was frosted glass, it didn't come off at all and somewhat made it clearer. I decided to ignore it, and it's currently still there. It creeps me out whenever I go into my parents' room, or especially the bathroom. The following story is from Linebreaker AC. Back in 2000, I was 13, living in the Midlands of England, in a small town between the cities of Coventry and Leicester. While out with 2 other friends, one my age and the other 2 years older, we decided to explore the younger friend's great uncle's house. My friend used to boast about how old the house was and the fact that his great uncle Jim had kept a lot of keepsakes from his past and other antiques. We all rode our bikes over to the house and explored the garden first. There was little here, an old gnarly tree, overgrown grass and weeds with an unkept greenhouse. We decided to go in. It was known that Jim, the owner, was out for the day, so we poked around inside. There were indeed a lot of old items and antiques. None of us are well off, so the house was small and nothing incredibly valuable inside, just things of personal worth to Jim. We decided to look upstairs. This is when it got real. We found ourselves in the bedroom and were looking through an old bedside table with a dresser and mirror. Curious, we opened one of its drawers and looked at an old pocket knife. This was left on top of the dresser. My younger friend then opened a picture. It looked like a big locket with no chain. He opened it up and placed it on top of the dresser in front of the mirror. I'll never forget the picture. Hand painted and very well done. It was of a woman, 30 to 40 years old, wearing a low-cut and fancy dress. Around her neck was a big silver necklace with a turquoise jewel at the center. Her eyes seemed to follow us, seemed to know we were there, her expression unapproved and unmoving. We were starting to freak out at this. Just as the three of us had agreed that the picture was odd and it was time to pack up and stop exploring, the room went very cold. Cliché as it was a clear sign and we all started to fret. The picture, knife, and everything we had gotten out went quickly back into the dresser. We heard the back door open and slam shut, and then footsteps were making their way towards the stairs. "Jim," my friend who was related to the homeowner shouted. No reply. Again he shouted, with no reply. We were all on the landing at this point, looking down the stairs towards the lower rooms. We could still hear the footsteps, close now, really close. Then the footsteps were on the stairs, which we could all plainly see. I must clarify, these footsteps were clear and loud. It was definitely not a neighbour or similar noise. Something was coming up the stairs, right in front of us. But there was nothing to be seen. I don't know how, but I knew there was something on the stairs, even if none of us could see it. At this point, we all panicked and we ran towards the back door, out of the house. We had to run through this invisible thing in order to get downstairs and out of the house. I should have jumped over the banister of the stairs as the footsteps were on the landing. Just at the point when we would have touched whatever it was, I and the two others were frozen in place. We were running at full pace and had a lot of momentum between us, but we were frozen in place. We just stopped dead, like someone had hit pause on a remote. Impossible as this was, I remember straining against whatever was holding me, trying with all my strength to carry on running, but I could not move a finger. It must have lasted no more than 3 seconds, but it felt much longer. Then, just as suddenly as it had begun, we all started moving again. Because we were all fighting whatever was holding us, we all landed in a heap at the top of the stairs. I pushed my way up and ran outside with the two friends. We cycled to a nearby park, top speed, and tried to make sense of what had just happened. I have never had such a frantic conversation, but safe to say, no one could rationalise what had happened. Needless to say, we didn't go back to Uncle Jim's. The following story is from Sammy JDH 6666. So I moved out of my mum's and in with my gran when I turned 17. I'm now 22. When I moved in, I positioned my bed to face my bedroom door, and I often stayed awake quite late like any other teen. One night I had just turned off my TV, but my bedroom light was still on, and my door was open so I could see perfectly into the hallway and the middle of the stairs landing. I was sitting on my phone and saw something out of the corner of my eye, coming from the bathroom side of the hallway. The bathroom was right next to my room. Then it went my gran's room and then the spare bedroom. I looked up and saw a man with blonde hair and a trench coat, along with some sort of boots on and dark trousers. He was pale, looking at him, and he looked a mess, covered in dirt and everything. I freaked out, thinking someone had broken in and was going to hurt my gran and grandpa. So I grabbed the closest thing to me, which was a book, and started to get out of my bed to try and chase him out of the house. He was walking down the stairs, and when he got to the middle part of them, he turned to look at me and smiled. I asked who he was and what he was doing in my house, but he continued to walk down the stairs. However, at the bottom of the stairs, the light from my bedroom stopped, so it was pitch black. and when I ran down and turned on the lights, he disappeared. His face was flawless apart from some dirt. His eyes were a stunning blue colour, not too dark, but not too light. He had no stubble or facial hair, but he had freckles. I double checked all the doors and windows to make sure they were all locked, and went back to sit in my bed and tried to comprehend what I had seen. I have always believed the afterlife and spirits exist, so I had two thoughts. Either I was so tired I imagined him, or he was an actual ghost. I spoke with my gran the next morning to see if anyone had died in the house before, and she asked if I had seen someone, to which I replied yes. She then asked what they had looked like, and when I described the man, she told me to sit down because she had a story to tell me. One day, her, my dad, uncle, and grandpa were sitting in the living room. My dad and uncle were sitting on one couch, and my grandpa and gran on the other. She was reading a book and looked up and saw a man standing behind my dad, smiling down at him. It was as if he knew him and was proud of him. Then he just walked out of the living room and disappeared. When she told my grandpa and he checked the house, there was no sign of anyone else there. She then described him, and everything matched up with my description. We have seen him a few more times, and I have recently moved out, but when I was telling my gran and grandpa I was moving in with my fiance, I felt so warm and calm, and my gran said she saw him in the doorway. I go back and stay every so often, and whenever I do, I feel like he is just watching me. Nothing sinister or evil has ever happened in that house, and anyone that walks into it just feels warm and calm. So I like to think this ghost has been protecting our family and the house for years. Update. I was speaking to my gran about the ghost, and she said my cousins were up last week who are very young, twins that are 3 years old, and they ran down the stairs giggling, saying they were playing with the nice man and he was going to catch them. But my gran said that they weren't scared or anything, they were just playing and happy. Thank you all very much for listening to this week's episode of Just Effing Ghost Stories. I believe this is number 6, and I am hoping to get the ball rolling again with these because I do love doing them. It can just be kind of time consuming to find stories that are actually worth telling. So with that being said, if you have your own, please send them to justfnghoststories@gmail.com. And if you have any other suggestions on particular topics that you might like, let me know. I can try and do a whole themed episode on whatever that topic is. With that being said, make sure to tune into Weekly Creep on Fridays, Saturday mornings, Friday nights, depending on where you are. We're currently covering Skinwalker Ranch, or Sherman Ranch as we're calling it. And yeah, don't forget to rate, review, subscribe, like, all those nice things. And see you in the next one.